Hello there. Welcome back to this quiet corner where the universe speaks in whispers. Before we begin, let the hours of the day dissolve like mist. Let your breath drift into a slower rhythm and let the noise of the world settle at the edges, leaving only calm at the center. Imagine a vast horizon under silent stars, the air cool and unbroken, the dark sky carrying a faint silver glow. Around you, threads of starlight slide across drifting dust. Long waves of light travel without sound, and clouds at the edge of vision breathe in patient turns. Tonight, we drift into the question of how vast our solar system truly is. Not a single point to measure, but a space unfolding layer by layer from the sun's steady heart through circling worlds out to the quiet rim where warmth fades into shadow. A story of distance, silence, and time flowing outward without end. What if the true size of the solar system is not found in numbers, but in the way it stretches, thought itself? And what if its farthest edge is less a boundary, more a horizon that melts into the night? Wherever you are now, in dim light in rain's hush, or in a still room warmed by quiet air, we share this small pause together under the same unseen expanse. If you wish to linger in slow journeys like this, you may stay a little longer. No haste, no demand, only a seat beside the gentle glow of wandering thought. So let the mind drift with the pace of starlight, and we will begin our walk through the vastness of the solar system, moving gently outward as if carried on a tide that knows no end. And slowly, the first step in this wide journey leads us back to the earth, resting in the quiet arms of the sun. The earth moves in its slow circle, not hurried, not strained, only turning as though it were a grain of sand carried gently around a glowing hearth. Its orbit, the invisible path of motion, holds it in balance, neither too close where heat would burn, nor too far where cold would silence, but in a place that feels like the center of a breath, steady, patient, unbroken. The movement is soft, like the swing of a cradle, rocking with a rhythm that does not end. And in that rhythm, life has found a way to rest and to bloom. Around the curve of the planet's seas shimmered clouds, drift, forest, breathe, all because of the distance held in that quiet line of travel. The sun immense and still gathers earth within its reach as if it were holding a small child in the vast arms of warmth. That warmth is not harsh fire here, but a gentle glow spread across the seasons, a glow that wakes the flowers and keeps oceans liquid, a glow that softens into twilight and whispers into dawn. In that gentle band of safety, sometimes spoken of as the habitable zone, the light settles like a cradle, wide enough to hold a world without letting it drift away. This zone is not a number, not a rule, but a soft region where balance rests, and within it, Earth finds the breath of life. The orbit itself can be imagined not as a rigid track, but as a flowing circle, like a river current that guides without force. The Earth leans into it as a sleeper leans into a pillow, finding comfort in the endless return, knowing that each passage will carry it back again. There is no haste in this turning, no struggle to keep place, only the slow wheel that matches the heartbeats of days, the long inhalation and exhalation of years. Time itself folds into this path, stretching out like silk, smooth, unbroken, tender beneath the stars. To look upon this dance is to feel the safety of measure without sharpness. The earth does not rush toward the sun, nor drift away into cold silence, but glides in a line that feels like the gentle swing of breath. Too close, the air would vanish. Too far, the seas would freeze. But here, in this distance, there is balance like the moment between waking and sleep, where all is held, yet all is light. The sun does not clutch it, only opens its warmth, and the earth drifts willingly, a companion in the endless dark. Gravity itself, often felt as a heavy word, unfolds here as nothing more than an embrace. It is not a chain or a tether, but the quiet pull of belonging, the way night gathers shadows into its fold, the way water gathers petals drifting on its surface. Gravity here is the breath of the sun, slow, and even drawing earth into rhythm without ever tightening its hold. It feels less like a force and more like a song, steady, circular, returning, always guiding the earth around and around in peace. To sense this is to feel the pulse of the system itself, vast, yet gentle, steady, yet soft. The earth remains in place not through effort, but through balance, as if it knows exactly where to be, and the sun, vast and calm, offers only the light and warmth required. Life on the surface follows this same rhythm, day folding into night seasons, leaning into one another, time measured not in clocks, but in the slow breath of orbit. Every dawn is a reminder of distance, held every dusk, a reminder of warmth, preserved each one a heartbeat in the circle of being. In this way, the Earth's orbit is not simply a path, but a lullaby of movement. Round and round it goes, like a wheel of quiet song, carrying with it forests and seas, winds and clouds, mountains and valleys, all tucked safely into a line of motion that never falters. The sun's arms stretch wide, holding the planet where it belongs, never too close, never too far, only where warmth and shadow can meet in harmony. And so, the earth rests suspended in light, turning gently, breathing, with the stars kept in the cradle of the sun's embrace. And from the earth's gentle path, the gaze drifts naturally inward toward the great light at the center. The sun rests there, carrying almost the whole weight of the system within itself, as though it were a single, immense heart beating in silence. Around it, all other bodies are small companions, circling softly, held in place by the warmth that does not fade. This weight is not felt as heaviness, but as presence, like the trunk of an ancient tree that steadies a forest, or the deep pulse beneath a quiet sea. The sun does not move quickly. It only glows, breathing light into the dark and holding the slow wheel of planets in its reach. Its glow is more than brightness. It is the gentle food of life, spreading outward in waves that never tire, reaching to the edges where the farthest rocks still catch a whisper of warmth. Each ray is like a thread of silk laid across the empty air, touching every world in turn. Closer worlds bathe in its glow, as though leaning against a fire, while distant ones catch only the faint memory of its breath. Yet still they turn, still they remain, bound by the heart that beats at the center. This radiance is not harsh. It is a tide of light flowing endlessly quiet, as the rhythm of sleep. Long ago, in the silence of watching skies, it was seen as a god, and the sun became the center of a quiet tale. In the land along the Nile, the sun was called Ra, and it was said that each day he guided his boat across the heavens, carrying light for every creature. The journey was not swift or sudden, but slow and measured, like the sweep of dawn and the sinking of dusk. The boat of Ra drifted as though on a river of night, and each stroke of its oar laid golden ripples upon the world. Even now, that story lingers like a soft echo, reminding that the sun is more than fire. It is a companion, moving gently across the endless sky. To think of the sun as a heart is to feel the pulse of its gift, not a pounding beat, but a long and steady rhythm, measured in ages, carrying with it the seasons and the lives of countless beings. Its warmth keeps seas in motion, winds alive, forests breathing, and clouds in their quiet drifting. Without it, there would be no song of water, no murmur of leaves, no slow dance of life beneath the sky. The sun holds all of this not with force, but with the softness of presence, like a candle that has burned for an eternity and still flickers without end. In the quiet of night, when the earth turns its face away, the warmth does not vanish, but rests waiting like a lull between breaths. When dawn returns, the light slips back across fields and oceans, touching each surface as though smoothing a blanket. This unbroken cycle is the music of the solar system, a lullaby repeated over and over until it becomes inseparable from the idea of rest. The sun sings without sound, and its song is the rhythm by which planets move, moons drift, and life itself continues to breathe. To see the sun in this way is to see not a blaze of fire, but a patient glow at the heart of a great circle. It is a lamp that has never been extinguished, a thread that binds worlds together, a presence that watches without judgment. It does not hurry, it does not falter, it only shines, and in that shining it becomes the pulse of time itself. Just as the chest rises and falls in sleep, so too does the light of the sun rise and set, giving shape to the days and to the years, weaving the quiet fabric of existence. The ancients were right to tell their story of Ra's journey, for each day the sun seems to sail across the sky, and each night it seems to sink beneath the horizon, only to rise again in calm assurance. This rhythm is not a drama, but a promise, soft as the returning tide, steady as the breath that fills the chest. And so, the sun becomes not only the center of the system, but the cradle of its peace, a heart that beats without strain, carrying warmth into every corner and singing gently the endless song of light. And from the sun's quiet glow, the thought drifts outward again to the small world that circles within its reach. The earth is tiny beside the sun, so small that if the sun were imagined as a great glowing ball, the earth would be no more than a seed resting in its shadow. Yet even in such smallness, there is no fear, only calm, for the orbit holds steady, carrying the planet in a gentle round that never breaks. The size of the sun may be vast, but its presence feels like protection, not weight, like a sky so wide that it shelters everything beneath it. The earth, fragile in its scale, floats as though in the curve of a hand, carried without effort, turning without end. This smallness becomes a comfort rather than a burden, for within it rests the certainty of safety. The earth does not rush, nor falter. It simply drifts in its circle, wrapped by the sun's warmth, as though by the rhythm of a lullaby. The quiet distance keeps the world in balance, not too close to scorch, not too far to freeze, but exactly where breath and water and cloud can flow. Each rotation of the planet around its star is like a long exhalation, slow and calm, and every return to its place is like the inhale that follows, unhurried and sure. There is a simple wonder in knowing that light itself takes its time to arrive, traveling across the space between in the span of a few soft minutes, not instant, not rushed. It is as if each ray were a letter written in gold, carried across the dark, and delivered gently to the waiting earth. By the time it reaches oceans and mountains, it has already been on a journey that feels like the pause between heartbeats, the silence before a note returns. And in that pause, there is only patience, only the certainty that the message will arrive. The earth lives within this rhythm, small but secure, fragile, yet steady, like a leaf floating on a vast and invisible current. The sun shines without hurry, the orbit curves without falter, and in between lies the safety of being held. To be small in the face of such enormity is not to be lost, but to be carried gently, faithfully, within a pattern that does not end. The stillness of night and the glow of day both rise from this same truth, that even a seed-sized world can rest within the embrace of something immeasurably large. In this way, the sense of proportion becomes a lullaby in itself. The immensity of the sun does not overwhelm, but soothes, because within its light, the earth knows its place, and within its orbit, it knows its rhythm. Every dawn is the arrival of a message, begun long before every dusk, the reminder that the circle continues, and every season a step in the breathing of the sky. To be small here is to be safe, to be sheltered, to be held, and in that feeling, the mind too can rest, as though it were drifting in the same slow orbit, turning softly through the silence of space. And from the sense of smallness and safety, the thought drifts gently to the circle that holds it all, the path that repeats without haste. The orbit can be imagined not as a strict line, but as a soft ring drawn through the dark, curving again and again, unbroken, patient. Around this invisible circle, the earth glides, never hurried, never lost, always finding its place, as though following the rhythm of a quiet song. The circle does not demand, it only allows, like the calm ripples on still water that return without end. Each round is a slow breath of time, an inhale of light, and an exhale of shadow, a balance between warmth and coolness, between day and night. In this orbit, the turning of the planet gives shape to the hours, setting the rhythm of dawn and dusk, of brightness and rest. Day unfolds like a soft stretch of light, and night gathers like a curtain falling, and together they form the gentle pulse of existence. The cycle is not rushed. It flows like a clock, made not of gears, but of stars, not of numbers, but of shadows, moving across the land. The orbit itself is a silent rhythm, not of seconds or minutes, but of seasons and tides, flowing without end. The seasons themselves are born from this same slow turn, each one a page turned without sound in the book of the year. Spring lifts softly, summer rests in warmth, autumn leans into fading light, and winter settles into sleep, and all of them are cradled within the same curve of orbit. Nothing is forced. Everything returns like the wheel of time, rolling without edges, carrying with it fields and oceans, forests and skies. Each season is an expression of the circle, a gentle reminder that the earth is not moving alone, but is guided in a dance that has always been. To sense the orbit is to feel the comfort of repetition. It is the pattern of breathing that soothes the chest, the ebb and flow of waves on a shore, the swing of a pendulum that never stops but never strains. The earth rests in this rhythm, and in that rest, life learns to follow flowers, opening to light leaves, falling with shadow tides, rising with the pull of unseen threads. All of it happens slowly, all of it without rush, as though time itself had chosen the gentlest pace. The universe asks nothing more than this soft turning this circle that never falters. There is no hurry in the stars, no command in the dark, only the steady motion that repeats like the whisper of breath. To imagine the orbit is to imagine lying beneath a wide sky and watching the slow sweep of constellations, knowing that they too are part of a greater turning. The Earth's circle is only one among countless others, each one moving, each one breathing, yet none breaking the silence of the whole. And so the orbit is not only a path of movement, but a lullaby written in space, a rhythm that cradles the planet and all within it. It sings without words, it guides without force, it repeats without end, and in that repetition there is peace. The earth turns, the light returns, the shadow follows the seasons lean into one another, and all of it is bound by a circle too wide to see, but too gentle to deny. To rest within that circle is to rest within the very rhythm of the universe, a rhythm that is nothing more than the endless breath of time, and from the gentle rhythm of the orbit, the vision lifts higher, as though rising softly above the scene. From this quiet height, the earth and the sun appear together, two companions in the middle of a wide and silent canvas. The sun glows at the heart, steady and patient, while the earth circles nearby, small and delicate, drifting in its path like a leaf upon invisible water. Around them spreads a spacious darkness, not empty, but calm, a vast expanse waiting quietly like a breath held between one moment and the next. The view is simple, yet in its simplicity, there is depth, for the center is only the beginning of something far larger. The imagination lingers on this picture, with the earth turning slowly wrapped in its atmosphere, clouds folded around its blue surface, like veils of silver. Beside it, the sun burns without effort, its light spilling outward, touching what can be touched, and continuing on into the stillness. The scene feels close, almost familiar, and yet the quiet space around it stretches endlessly, hinting that other worlds unseen from here also wander in their circles. What is visible is only the first note of a long, unbroken song, the beginning of a melody still unfolding. Beyond the earth, in the calm layers of distance, other planets wait, each on its own path, each moving to the same unhurried rhythm. They are not yet in view, but their presence is suggested, like shapes behind a curtain or voices waiting to join a choir. The orbit of Earth is only one line in a pattern of many, and the glow of the sun reaches outward to all of them, reminding that the circle does not end here. There is comfort in knowing that the system extends, that the journey continues beyond the familiar horizon. The picture grows wider, not through sudden change, but through a slow unfolding, like the way dawn stretches its colors across the sky. The earth and the sun remain at the center, yet the silence around them whispers of paths, yet unseen, of companions yet unnamed. The vastness does not press down. It opens gently like a tide, pulling back to reveal the shore. The mind can rest in that openness, sensing that there is more, without needing to grasp or measure, only allowing the image to expand. From above, the system resembles a great wheel, though no spokes or edges are seen, only circles moving within circles like ripples across a sleeping pond. The first ripple is Earth's delicate and steady, and around it, more will come spreading outward in widening arcs. Each ripple is a promise of another world, another motion, another rhythm that belongs to the whole, and yet the center remains constant, the sun, a silent anchor holding the harmony together without word or demand. The thought pauses, here resting on the stillness between what is seen and what is not yet revealed. The earth and the sun hold their place in the middle of a vast embrace, while beyond them lie paths that will be traced in time. The picture does not need to be complete to be calming. Its incompleteness is its gentleness, for it allows space to breathe room, to imagine time to drift. The solar system begins here, but its reach goes farther than sight can tell, farther than thought can hold. So the mind lingers on this opening image, simple yet spacious, a cradle for wonder and for rest. The earth circles the sun, and the sun glows at the heart, and around them lies quietness waiting. It is the first glimpse of a great expanse, a soft unfolding into distance, a hint of worlds yet to come. And in that hint, there is calm, for the story does not end. It only continues wide and slow, like breath drawn across the silence of the sky. And from the stillness that holds earth and sun, the gaze drifts outward to the first companions, close to the heart of the fire. Mercury moves nearest, a world so small it could slip unnoticed into the folds of darkness, yet it holds its place, circling steadily around the globe. Its surface shifts between heat and cold, not gently, but with contrasts that rise and fall like a breath that has forgotten smoothness, leaving it bare, silent, and still. This planet is without cloud, without veil, a quiet stone wandering in the light of the star, turning softly, carrying its solitude with patience. No forests, no seas, only the hush of rock, warmed by day and cooled by night. And even in that barrenness, it belongs another note in the long rhythm of the system. Venus follows, wrapped in a thick shroud, its air heavy, its face hidden beneath endless layers of cloud. The brightness that comes from it is not from what is seen, but from what is reflected, a glow that reaches even to Earth's twilight sky. In the still hours before sunrise and after sunset, Venus shines as the evening star or the morning star, luminous against the quiet canvas of night. Its presence feels closer than it is, as though leaning from afar to leave a trace of gold upon the horizon. Wrapped in secrecy, yet radiant, it has long been the planet of mystery and beauty. In older times, voices gave Venus another shape, one softer than rock or cloud. To the Romans, it was bound to Venus, the goddess of love, carrying her name as though it were a crown of light. She was imagined stepping across the heavens, her glow touching seas and hearts, a gentle fire, shining not with heat, but with desire. Even now, the planet's brightness recalls that story, as if the goddess still lingers in its shine, drifting above as an eternal companion to dawn and dusk. The myth rests within the glow, and the glow rests within the orbit, turning all the while in silence. Together, Mercury and Venus circle quietly around the sun, like two attendants in a vast and solemn procession. They move differently, one small and bare, the other veiled and bright, but both remain steady, never straying from the rhythm. They do not rush. They do not call for notice. They simply turn quiet, satellites around the central fire. Their closeness makes them feel like whispers of the sun itself, shadows of its warmth, fragments of its song. They are reminders that the heart of the system is not alone, but surrounded, held in quiet company. To see these two worlds as more than rock and cloud is to feel them as tones in a greater music. Mercury, with its silence, Venus, with its glow, both part of the harmony that stretches outward from the center. They are not the whole, only the beginning, the soft opening chords of a symphony that expands across the dark. Each orbit is a note repeated, steady and calm, each reflection of light, a pause that lingers, and as they circle, they prepare the ear for the music that will follow planets, yet unseen paths yet to be traced. So the image rests here with Mercury and Venus, drifting quietly around the sun, one bare as stone, the other radiant as mist, both bound to the same embrace of light. In their turning lies no urgency, only the slow unfolding of distance and glow. They are small beside the star, yet they hold their place steady as the beat of breath, patient as the coming of dawn. They shine, and they circle companions to the fire, and in their presence, the solar system begins to widen like the first ripples of a tide that will move on and on into the dark. And from the nearness of Mercury and Venus, the vision drifts to the next companions, two siblings moving side by side in their quiet rounds. The Earth turns first into view, a sphere veiled in blue and white oceans, shimmering like liquid mirrors, clouds wandering as though in dream forests, breathing in silence, and mountains resting like folded shadows. Its face is alive with motion, not hurried, not strained, but carried in the soft balance of air, water, and light. The earth carries its greenness as though it were a song tender and endless, circling around the sun in a rhythm as gentle as sleep. It is a place where rivers find their way to seas, where winds travel across fields, and where each day leans softly into night. The whole world seems to exhale and inhale, joining the orbit with the ease of breath. Beside it, Mars drifts in its own circle, smaller, quieter, and tinted in the deep red of dust. The surface is dry now, marked by valleys and plains that stretch out like the pages of a forgotten book. Yet there are whispers of what once was, traces of rivers that flowed, basins that once held seas, channels carved by water, now long gone. The planet holds these memories in silence, as if keeping them folded beneath layers of sand, like dreams that visit but do not return. In the hush of its present state, Mars glows softly, a lantern of rust drifting in the dark. Together, they move Earth and Mars, as though two brothers in an unbroken walk, one clothed in blue, the other in red. Their orbits are not the same, but they share the same music, circling the sun in harmony, each step measured, each turn gentle. The closeness between them is not of touch, but of rhythm, a silent companionship written into the sky. They remain near in the great scale of distance, each one knowing the other is present, even when hidden by the span of space. In this companionship, there is both difference and kinship, two voices carried in the same long song. There is a quiet wonder in how their days unfold. On Earth, a day is marked by the sun's rise and fall, the tilt of shadows, the hum of life moving through its cycle. On Mars, the same turning carries on the same slow spin under the sun's light, with a day only slightly longer, as though the breath of time there lingers a little more. before it exhales again. This similarity is like two heartbeats that echo each other, not in perfect unison, but close enough to feel like companions, two rhythms running side by side in the stillness of space. And so, one planet is full of seas and forests, alive with voices and colors, while the other rests in silence, keeping its red dust and quiet winds. One is a cradle of life, the other a memory of water, and yet both belong to the same circle, both drawn into the same embrace of the sun. To think of them together is to feel the balance of contrast fullness beside emptiness, song beside hush breath, beside stillness. Neither stands alone, both are part of the same unfolding, a pair of worlds drifting patiently in their endless rounds. The picture lingers here, with Earth and Mars turning slowly along their orbits, soft circles drawn in the dark like two siblings, moving in calm procession, held by the same light, carried by the same darkness. Their nearness speaks softly of kinship, of journeys that run side by side, even when their paths are not the same. They are reminders that the solar system is not a collection of strangers, but a quiet family of worlds, each carrying its own story, each turning to the same rhythm of time. In the silence of their motion, there is comfort, as though the vastness of space itself were breathing with them, cradling their orbits in the unbroken song of the sun. And from the red hush of Mars, the gaze drifts farther outward, where a vast presence waits, not hurried, not loud, only immense and still. Jupiter rests there, the largest of the planets, a giant not of stone, but of gas, layered in bands that flow like endless ribbons across its face. Within those bands lie storms so wide they could swallow worlds, yet from afar they appear only as slow whirls of color turning without threat, only marking the rhythm of the atmosphere. Among its vast storms drifts a red oval, turning like a patient wheel, a circle within circles, moving through centuries, as though marking time without ever disturbing the silence of space. To look upon Jupiter is to sense vastness that does not crush, but steadies, like a mountain seen from a great distance, serene and unmoving. Around this giant gather many moons, each a companion in its orbit, circling with calm regularity, as though drawn to the quiet strength of their parent. Some are small, little more than stones, drifting like grains of sand caught in a current, while others are large enough to be worlds in their own right, carrying ice oceans or mountains within them. Together, they form a family, a silent procession that moves in harmony, each one returning again and again to the path it knows. To imagine them is to see a flock of birds gliding across a dark sky. No sound, no rush, only the reassurance of repeated flight. The moons keep their watch, and in their watch the giant planet becomes gentler, softened by company. The presence of Jupiter is felt not in force, but in the steadiness of being there, wide, luminous, and assured. It glows faintly in the night sky, brighter than most, yet still no more than a star. To the resting eye, a lantern at the edge of vision. In old stories, some voices gave it the name of Zeus, imagined as a king of gods. Yet here, across the vastness, it appears not as ruler, but simply as presence, a patient flame suspended in the dark. The myths speak of power, but the view speaks only of stillness, a patient flame suspended in the dark. Even the name becomes softened in distance, less a title of authority, more a whisper of reverence. The planet carries within it the patterns of time on a scale too wide to count. Yet what reaches the heart is not its scale, but its calm. Clouds drift across its face in slow layered bands, each one folding into the next, like waves rolling in an eternal tide. Light from the sun touches those clouds and scatters, painting them in shades of cream gold and rust, as though dawn had been stretched into permanence. The sight is not fierce, but dreamlike, a canvas of motion unhurried, drawn out across centuries, like a lullaby that never ends. The vastness, instead of unsettling, becomes a cradle of quiet repetition, soothing in its enormity. To drift here in thought is to rest in the embrace of enormity that does not overwhelm, to feel the nearness of countless moons as guardians in their steady flight, and to let the mind float upon the layered clouds that move with endless patience. In Jupiter's vastness, there seems no weight in its storms, no terror, only the sense that magnitude itself drifts into a kind of comfort when seen from the stillness of distance. It is the giant of the solar system, yet also its quiet elder, standing not as a warning, but as a vast and gentle presence, steady in its orbit, constant in its glow. And so the vision rests with Jupiter, suspended in its slow grandeur, the moons turning softly around it, and the bands of clouds drifting in their eternal song. The myth of Zeus fades into the background, leaving only the sight of a luminous giant that neither commands nor threatens, but simply is a presence of calm in the unbroken dark. The story of Jupiter is not one of fear, but of steadiness, not of rule, but of companionship. And in that presence, the solar system feels wider, softer, and more complete. And from here, thought can drift onward, carried by the same tide of light and shadow toward the next waiting world. From the calm glow of Jupiter, the vision drifts outward, and in the quiet distance, another giant slowly appears, quieter, yet adorned in its own way, a world encircled by delicate bands that seem less like matter and more like whispers of light. Saturn rests. In the distance, its form wrapped in rings so fine and gentle that they seem to float as fabric, wood spread wide and thin across the silence. These rings, though immense, when seen from afar, are no more than a veil of countless fragments, each one a piece of ice or stone, tiny in itself, yet together forming a luminous circle. In the hush of space they glimmer softly, not sharp or piercing, but as though moonlight had been poured into a flowing ribbon, wrapping itself around the planet with infinite patience. Saturn itself appears calm, pale in its glow, and the rings move with it, circling again and again unhurried, like breath returning in endless rhythm. Each particle within the rings shines briefly when touched by the sun, scattering light like grains of frost catching dawn. None are large, none are threatening. They are simple fragments, drifting as they have drifted for ages, bound not by weight, but by the invisible embrace of gravity, a pull as gentle as tide water, drawing sand back to the shore, soft and unhurried. Together, they form the appearance of a wide and endless band, yet if gathered and pressed, the rings would be no thicker than a folded cloth, no deeper than a scarf resting upon the shoulders of the planet. To think of this is to feel how even grandeur can be born of delicacy, how immensity itself can be woven of small and gentle things. The rings seen from above stretch in concentric circles, each one faintly distinct, yet all merging into a single harmony like ripples upon still water. They carry within them the sense of repetition, without end the circling of time itself, where no beginning and no conclusion are marked, only the return again and again to the same path. Such return brings not monotony, but reassurance, a reminder that even in the vastness of the universe, there are rhythms that do not falter. Saturn turns, and the rings turn, with it softly, aligned quietly, constant as though the planet were clothed in the flowing garment of its own eternity. Ancient eyes once lifted toward this light and saw wonder in its form, imagining not fragments of ice but divine adornment, a crown set upon the head of a celestial ruler, or a veil drawn by unseen hands across the night. Myths gave it grandeur, and yet across time the reality seems even more gentle. The planet does not rule, does not demand. It simply carries its rings as a tree, carries blossoms in spring, natural, and unforced a part of itself, yet always changing, always scattering light in soft variations. The myth becomes less of command, more of reverence, softened by distance, hushed by the silence in which it rests. To linger in thought upon Saturn is to be drawn not to its size, but to its quiet ornament, the fragile bands that gleam without weight. They circle endlessly, a lullaby written in ice and shadow, spreading wide, yet never heavy, bright yet never harsh. The rings soothe with their constancy, as though each turn were a whispered reminder of cycles that do not break. In them, night seems to fold upon itself calm and infinite, carrying the listener deeper into stillness. Saturn becomes less a world and more a presence, dressed in ribbons that shimmer faintly like silk caught in the breeze of a dream. And so, the vision of Saturn rests, the planet cradled within its delicate loops, the rings stretching outward as far as sight will allow, yet never pressing, never overwhelming. They are a veil and a scarf, a flowing circle of fragments that drift in silence, giving the sense that time itself has slowed, softened, and settled into a pattern too calm to disturb. To dwell here is to feel the ease of vastness, wrapped in light fabric, the immensity of space tempered by fragility. Saturn, in its gentle adornment, becomes a symbol of how the universe holds both grandeur and grace, endlessness and tenderness, all woven into one. And as thought lingers, the rings continue their turn, unbroken, unhurried, circling in silence, a soft rhythm upon which the mind may rest. From here, it is natural to drift further, to let the journey carry on from Saturn's flowing ribbons into the deeper quiet beyond. From the flowing ribbons of Saturn, thought moves farther still into a quieter distance, where the sun's warmth is only a pale memory, and the giants of the far edge keep their patient vigil. Uranus appears first, a world tinted in shades of a soft green-blue, turning slowly on its side, as though resting in a posture unlike the others. Its presence feels hushed, like a lantern left glowing in the dimmest corner of the night, its light faint but enduring. Around it, moons trace delicate paths, weaving circles in silence, each one small yet steady like motes of dust suspended in a beam of twilight. The planet turns unhurried, its tilted spin giving it a rhythm of its own, a quiet song different from all the others, though still part of the same vast symphony. To imagine this turn is to feel a breath, held long and slow, a reminder that even at great distance motion continues steady as a pulse that does not falter. Farther still lies Neptune deeper into the dark, where the sun is no longer a radiant blaze, but a faint thread of gold stretched across the void. Neptune glows with a deeper blue, rich and cold, like the floor of an ocean unlit by day, its storms turning quietly within its heavy clouds. Yet from afar, no storm is harsh. All blends into the same serene sphere, circling with dignity, distant, but not alone. Around it drift faint arcs of rings and a family of moons, pale attendants who follow in silence, their presence no more than whispers in the deep. The planet feels less like a body of matter and more like a dream of the sea floating in a space that has become an ocean without shore. In old tales, Neptune was whispered as the realm of Poseidon, a figure of the sea, and here, that image drifts softly, not as command, but as a distant echo. The far planet seems like a realm of tides, beyond sight, a vast sea woven not of waves, but of shadow and wind, a sea where no sailor sets sail, and yet the hush of its depths feels familiar. To let the mind drift upon it is to sink into a calm, wider than any ocean, a depth that is not threatening, but embracing, as though the universe itself breathes in long intervals, holding this world in the slow exhale of eternity. Myth folds into science here, without seam, for both are softened into the same lullaby of distance. Both Uranus and Neptune turn slowly wrapped in cold, wrapped in silence, yet their paths remain sure, circling the sun as if listening still to its call. Though faint, the light reaches them, a pale thread that touches their surfaces with a memory of warmth enough to mark the rhythm of their days, enough to remind that even at the edge connection is not lost. Their constancy offers reassurance. No matter how far the pattern holds, the orbit remains, and the story of the solar system does not break. They are the guardians of distance, the keepers of the farthest edge, their calm turning, adding depth to the great wheel that includes all. And yet, as thought lingers on these distant giants, there rises a gentle wonder about what lies still beyond. The planets end, but the space does not. The solar system stretches past even Neptune, into regions where small icy wanderers drift into the quiet beyond maps, into a darkness that feels endless and yet patient. The journey through the planets pauses here, with Neptune shining faintly at the threshold, and Uranus resting not far behind, both standing as markers of the far boundary. Yet the silence beyond them asks a question that has no final answer. So the mind rests here at the edge of what can be seen with two blue worlds circling in the cold, still faithful to the same sun, still a part of the same breath of time. Beyond them, there is only the soft pull of mystery, of vastness without frame, inviting the thought to drift further, even as the body sinks toward rest. And in that lingering, the question floats like a star, not yet named. How wide is this cradle of worlds? And how much farther does the solar system truly go out at the quiet rim of the sky? Small frozen bodies drift like salt scattered over a dark cloth, whispering in the long breath of space, where light wanders like a traveler, carrying a lantern of paper, arriving late and leaving late, laying a pale trace across the cooling black. Pluto moves slowly, like a lantern, with a frozen wick swaying in the thin wind, leading its faint companion in a slow turning dance, the two exchanging places as if their orbit were a soft bell, letting darkness pass, then offering a narrow return of light. Eris lies farther still, like a pebble hidden in a winter glove, silent, yet present, firm, yet gentle, a quiet mark pressed onto the edge of night's score. The belt of ice is no border, but a scarf of gray wool wrapped loosely around the shoulders of dusk, thread to thread, ring to ring, not hurried, not ending, not demanding to be named. Only breath remains, only light that goes and returns like a tide dissolving into sleep. The paths here are not roads of strain, but stitches drawn across the ceiling of the heavens, with silver thread each stitch, a habit old as silence, each habit a lullaby, carried through many seasons of rest. Pluto, often called a dwarf, appears like a child, wrapped in a thick blanket, small to keep the warmth, round to roll gently on the icy rug, sometimes tilting its head as if seeking the pillow of darkness, breathing so steadily it sounds like silence itself. Eris wears the long cloak of the far night, poised like a fingertip brushing the rim of glass, letting its echo wander through the air before falling like dew upon the lip of a door. Other fragments scatter nearby like dust, shaken from a dry flower, each grain a faded memory, like the faint smoke of an old fire lingering on cloth, drifting together and apart like fish moving through a dim pond. No rush, so slow, a song begun long ago, still humming. Sometimes the breath of the sun slips through the loose weave of that scarf of ice, and the fragments ring like a string of crystal chimes, the sound faint carried on, breaking into silence in the hollow dark, leaving only a trace like vapor on a winter breath. In those moments, Pluto leans upon the back of Shadow, releasing a deep note, and Eris follows with a higher one. Their duet a chord, both cold and tender, turning the edge into a bedroom fast with curtains not fully drawn, wind allowed to enter just enough for the scent of night, just enough for warmth hidden in blankets to be revealed. The other frozen bodies, some round as wet stones, some long like shards, some soft as loose snow, on a collar, move in a procession, without drum or banner, only the steps of quiet across a darkened floor. Their orbits need no measure, no call, only as thread finds the eye of a needle, knowing the way, knowing when to pause each turn, a verse of a forgotten song that still falls into rhythm. Motion becomes habit, habit becomes sleep, and then stillness. When night draws another blanket, close light thins like milk across the lashes. Pluto becomes a pale drop gliding on its familiar path, like a hand winding a music box, each turn a line of verse without a period, while Eris places a delicate pause further out. So, the verse ends without ending a space that keeps its warmth. The other icy fragments align into patterns unreadable, like marks on an old teapot, vanishing when the steam bends, reappearing when it settles, a game that arrives and departs without victory, without appointment, only the cadence of breath and pause. The icy belt becomes a windowsill where night rests, its arm shifting the wrist now and then to let silver fall into dust, falling so lightly it cannot be heard yet, filling the room of stillness. Within that stillness, Pluto seals itself like wax, pressed upon the fold of night's letter, leaving a soft circle to bind the page, while Eris curves like the ink stroke, leaning away, making space for silence to speak and return. Only breath, only the air of sleep, and still it drifts. The Kuiper belt spreads outward like an ocean, made not of water, but of frozen light, a sea that surrounds the known planets with a hush so deep it feels woven into the fabric of silence itself. Its expanse does not roar or churn. It drifts as though the horizon itself We're breathing slowly, each inhalation drawing shadows into the dark, each exhalation releasing a glimmer that lingers like frost upon glass. Within that sea, countless fragments move, each no larger than a memory, each carrying the faint echo of ancient fire, now cooled into stillness. They are the waves of this frozen tide, unbreaking, unending, sliding past one another, without sound, a rhythm so subtle, it feels like the background hum of sleep itself. No borders rise to mark where the sea begins, no lines appear to show where it fades. There is only continuity, unhurried and endless. At times the sun, distant and softened, casts a thread of warmth across that wide ocean, not enough to melt, only enough to let the ice whisper faintly, like glass touched by breath. The belt gleams then like a veil of dusted silver, delicate as lace laid upon the shoulder of space, thin enough for light to pass, thick enough to cloak the dark. The fragments, large and small, turn in their own measures, not in chaos, but in a shared stillness, like the movements of a sleeping choir, each note drawn out across centuries, each pause resting longer than a human life. Together, they are less a crowd than a drifting congregation of silence, an assembly where each voice is a particle of frost. The sea does not rise, does not fall. It simply holds as though eternity itself has found a form of calm. The orbit of that frozen ocean circles the worlds within, like a cradle rimmed with frost, surrounding without pressing, containing without confining, holding in the way night holds the stars. The inner planets spin with their warmth and storms, but beyond them, this belt waits unmoving in its patience, reminding the cosmos that stillness is its own kind of music. Each object here is an ember, cooled to ash, yet ash, that glows faintly in the memory of fire, carrying with it the story of beginnings, written in ice rather than flame. Their gathering is not an accident, nor a boundary, but a rhythm stretched so wide that it blurs into the horizon itself. Breathing in the sea draws shadow closer. Breathing out, it releases a faint shimmer, a snowfall that never touches ground. The Kuiper belt is not a line, but a vast ring of sleep, circlet of frozen fragments, circling a hearth they will never reach, like children standing at the edge of firelight, swaying gently, never stepping closer, never straying farther. Its existence is less about presence than about surrounding, less about being seen than about being felt, a pressure as soft as a hand resting on the shoulder of night. Here, time does not count in minutes or years, but in orbits that take longer than thought, in distances that unravel like dreams too long to remember. Each path curves softly, like threads of smoke, curling through still air, never rushed, never sharp. The sea simply continues, endless and even. And so, the Kuiper belt lies there, an ocean without waves, a hush without end, a band of frozen breath encircling the warm inner worlds. It holds no storms, only drifting frost, no voices, only echoes long since dimmed. Yet in its quiet, it shapes the outer boundary of familiarity, not by drawing a line, but by offering a veil, not by closing, but by enclosing. It is the pause between heartbeats, the silence between notes, the horizon at the edge of sight. To speak of it is to touch the edge of sleep, where knowledge fades into image, where fact blurs into dream, where the sea of ice continues, without beginning, without end, circling like the breath of the universe itself, steady, patient, unbroken. The sunlight that wanders so far loses its strength, thinning into a pale wick flickering like an oil lamp left on a distant windowsill, its flame trembling in the hush of a room already half asleep. The glow no longer carries the warmth of day, but drifts as a faded thread woven through the dark, brushing the edges of frozen fragments and leaving only the memory of brightness. Shadows lean closer, and the gleam retreats like breath drawn in, held softly against the silence of endless night. Nothing sharp, remains only the wavering pulse of light that seems to breathe with the rhythm of the void itself. It is not absence, but a whisper of presence that refuses to fade entirely. And then a pause. The light bends across the surfaces of ice, as though painting with milk, pale strokes on glass that will never melt, lines drawn not to illuminate, but to soothe. Every shard and sphere reflects a different echo of that fragile lantern, sending the glow outward in a chorus, too soft to be called bright, a shimmer like frost dusting the rim of a dream. The path of illumination falters not in defeat, but in surrender, yielding to the patience of darkness that has learned to cradle rather than consume. So, the lamp remains a distant ember, refusing both to vanish and to blaze, balanced on the breath of stillness. Each flicker is a heartbeat, stretched long, stretched slow, as if the universe itself is leaning into sleep. The faint glow continues. Beyond the wide orbit of wandering fragments, the glow hangs like a veil torn thin, trembling on the horizon of space, where silence grows deep enough to have weight. The sun, a hearth too far to warm, becomes here a memory of fire, more than fire itself, a thought of warmth drifting like incense through a temple of frost. The belt of ice accepts the glow, neither holding nor rejecting, only allowing it to pass, as though acknowledging a guest whose footsteps are too light to stir the floor. This sea of frozen breath does not ask for light, yet light arrives, diminished, humbled, and still it lingers. It lingers like a sigh that refuses to dissolve. And again a breath. Where the glow touches fragments, gleam not as torches, but as pearls, hidden in the folds of dark cloth, each one faintly alive, with reflection, each one echoing a lantern carried in a faraway hand. These reflections drift in circles, their movements neither hurried nor still, like the slow turning of sleepers in a wide bed of night. Each orbit is another ripple in the dimness, each shimmer another thread of the same endless lullaby. The glow is weak, yet in weakness it finds tenderness, soft enough to rest on the shoulders of silence without breaking it. The oil lamp does not blaze, yet it guides, though there is no path to follow, only the hush of continuation. The hush deepens. The flame remains as a reminder, not of heat, but of endurance, a lamp left at the far edge of memory, keeping vigil in a house made entirely of night. Even here, at the boundary where light should falter, the glow persists, dim yet steady, like the faintest pulse beneath closed skin. It marks no beginning, offers no end, only a rhythm so slow that it becomes the rhythm of the void itself, a breathing too wide to notice, too gentle to resist. The oil lamp trembles, the wick bends, the glass grows misted, yet the flame holds. It holds because even darkness needs a lantern, however faint, to fold into its arms. And in that folding, the glow and the dark become the same. All motion drifts with patience, softened into a rhythm that asks for nothing more than to continue stretching like the long inhalation of a sleeping sea, quiet, gentle, unbroken. The turning of distant spheres is without urgency, as though each circle were a lullaby drawn slowly on the dark, a thread of silver stitched into velvet that does not fray, does not tighten, only holds. The sweep of fragments across the wide belt is steady, not hurried, not faltering each one, finding its path as naturally as a leaf, resting on a calm stream. Shadows lean closer, and light folds back, and in that meeting, no clash appears, only the softness of a breath that lingers longer than memory. The movement is not command, not drive, but the slow yielding of silence to silence. It is all motion, and yet it is all stillness. And then a pause. The planets turn in their long embrace, their faces hidden and revealed in cycles that resemble the closing and opening of eyes in sleep, never rushed, never forced, only returning as though they had always been meant to return. The moons drift around them like children circling in play, too slow to be called play, repeating steps that have been repeated beyond count, each repetition smoothing the path until it is only a curve of ease. Across the darkness, comets wander with tails of breath, not chasing, not escaping, but gliding, as if each journey were a whispered exhalation into the folds of night. The arcs they draw are wide enough to feel endless, yet gentle enough to feel weightless, so that the line between moving and resting disappears. Every step of orbit is drawn out like the low hum of a note held longer than a song. It becomes silence by becoming so slow. The silence deepens. Stars themselves lean in their places, their shimmering of vibration too subtle to measure each pulse a flicker, like the chest rising of something vast asleep. Their brightness drifts across gulfs, not racing, not pressing, but arriving as dew might arrive, not at once, but always, never missing, never too soon. The belt of ice at the edge glitters, not in sharpness, but in the quiet way frost glitters on wood at dawn, unmoving, yet alive with breath. The flow of galaxies themselves stretches outward, not rushing to fill, but expanding like a sigh that grows wider, a sigh that never ends, a sigh that does not need to end. The motion is vast, yet softened into a rhythm, so patient, it feels eternal. It folds back into stillness again and again, and then another breath. The darkness between bodies is not emptiness, but a resting cloth, a quilt of space that cradles each orbit, each drift in the same unbroken hush. Where dust moves, it is not a storm, but a slow dance of particles turning upon themselves, like the slow curl of smoke rising from a lamp, dispersing and reforming, without hurry, without destination. Even the breath of the sun, reaching outward with its faint touch, arrives here as a whisper, not a blaze laying across fragments as gently as a hand across the brow. What seems motion is only softness extended. What seems stillness is only motion slowed beyond measure. Both are the same in this rhythm of quiet. And in that sameness lies the hush of sleep, and the hush holds. The universe sways, not as a clock, not as a march, but as a cradle hung in infinite night rocking, without force, rocking without end. Each cycle is another breath, each orbit another turn of the lullaby's wheel, round and round, never needing to stop, never needing to begin. Motion passes through darkness like a tide that cannot be hurried, retreating and returning with the same patience, the same softness, until time itself feels like a river that has forgotten to flow quickly. Every curve is gentle, every turn unbroken, every drifting path a thread tied into the larger cloth of stillness. And in this cloth, every movement is slow, every movement is kind, every movement is a breath stretched into the eternity of sleep. It feels as though the edge of a vast garden has been reached, yet no edge appears, only the sense of stepping into a meadow without border, where every breath carries farther and farther, folding the air into silence. The stars are the blossoms here, scattering their pale petals across an endless field, swaying not in wind, but in the rhythm of their own faint shimmer, each one trembling like a candle behind glass. Darkness is not absence, but the soft soil beneath, holding every stem, holding every trace of light, letting the garden extend without measure. No path is marked, yet every step seems already placed, as if the ground had prepared itself for the hush of feet. The feeling is not of beginning or ending, but of drifting forward into a presence without limit. And then a pause. The horizon bends like a hedge that cannot be touched, retreating, as it is approached, reshaping itself as if woven from mist and night. The constellations linger as clusters of fragrant vines curling and uncurling, painting arcs too wide to follow, yet never breaking apart, never withering. The quiet air of space lies heavy as a dusk that has forgotten to fade, wrapping itself like a cloak that muffles every sound, yet leaves the glimmer of fireflies to flicker through. Each planet appears as a hidden fountain, still and patient, offering reflections that ripple only in the mind, never disturbing the calm of the larger pond. The garden grows wider with every breath, not through change, but through the refusal to end. The refusal itself becomes the rhythm. Every fragment of ice, beyond the known paths, drifts like seeds floating on water, settling only to rise again, circling in slow spirals that resemble the turning of a dream. Their motion is not hurried, not bound, but given over to the quiet hand of the garden itself, a hand unseen, guiding with the patience of centuries. Even comets trace their long curves, like wayward vines, climbing out beyond the trellis, their tails unraveling like threads of smoke, drifting across a lantern's glow. Light itself wanders in thin strands, softer here than nearer the hearth, yet still clinging like dew on leaves that refuse to dry. The field does not narrow, does not close. It only continues unbroken, and still continuation. The airless dark is a bed where shadows recline, not hostile, but embracing, spreading like velvet, so that every bloom of starlight has a place to rest, every orbit a cradle to sway within. Galaxies arch like groves upon groves, layered one behind another, their trunks invisible, but their crowns shimmering like canopies of frost. Between them lies no emptiness, only more expanse. Another clearing that leads into another corridor of night opening without door. Time itself drifts, as pollen drifts, settling across petals, carrying memory without urgency, carrying promise without demand. The garden holds everything in its stillness, and still the stillness does not end. And then quiet again, the sense of wandering deeper into this boundless grove becomes indistinguishable from the sense of resting, as though the act of walking were itself a form of sleep. Each star leans nearer, like a lamp left burning on a branch, each cluster of worlds, like a circle of flowers, listening without words, breathing their slow perfume into the silence, the further the path extends, the more it folds into itself like a ribbon unspooling forever without finding its last length. The edge is never reached because it is never drawn, and so the steps continue and the garden remains and the breath expands. It feels as though entry has only just begun, though the journey has always been underway. It feels as though the edge is always near and always further forever. The Oort cloud has never been seen, yet it is believed to wrap itself around the whole system like a shawl of invisible frost stretching farther than thought, resting farther than memory. It lingers at the edge of knowing, a veil drawn so wide it blurs into the dark, a mist that is felt more than touched, whispered more than shown. No eye has traced its form, no lens has caught its outline, and yet the sense of it remains as though the breath of the universe itself carries the impression of a boundary made not of walls, but of sleep. It is a presence that drapes across the night like the softest snowfall, too far to be held, too near to be denied. It is silence shaped into a horizon, and then a pause. Within that unseen veil, fragments of ancient frost are thought to drift, seeds of ice scattered in a sphere so wide it becomes a cocoon, not closed, not open, only surrounding. Their motion is patient, so patient it blurs into stillness, each one circling with the grace of dust carried on water, each one a forgotten ember glowing faintly in the dark. They are not gathered in crowds, yet they are not alone, for the veil itself holds them together as a single breath holds many sighs. They move not to arrive, not to depart, only to continue tracing paths that echo the slow rotation of a lantern's shadow. In their presence, distance becomes a dream, and the dream becomes a hush. The hush deepens. The whole of the system rests within this imagined garden of ice, a hearth ringed not with stone, but with drifting frost, where every planet and comet turns like a flame within a lamp shaded by shadow. The Oort cloud holds the lamp, its unseen glass curving around the fire, letting the glow escape, yet softening it into calm. No one has touched its rim, yet all within the system breathe as though sheltered by it, as though the cloud itself were a blanket laid over the cradle of stars. In its absence of shape, it gives the comfort of form; in its distance, the sense of closeness. The cloud waits silent and unmeasured, holding everything without being held. And then again, stillness. It is believed to be the wellspring from which wanderers are born, comets that fall inward like forgotten children, returning their icy hair trailing long through the dark, their arcs reminders that even the farthest veil breathes with the same rhythm as the center. Yet even as these travelers appear, the body of the cloud remains unseen, refusing both to vanish and to declare itself content to linger like the perfume of a flower no one has yet found. The veil becomes the memory of every return, the suggestion of every departure, a cycle unbroken because it need not be proved to be felt. Its edges dissolve into dream, and dream dissolves into night. The garden grows wider, and still the garden is hidden. And so the night folds. The Oort cloud, never glimpsed, never touched, remains as the softest horizon, a circle of unlit frost, thought to encase the familiar worlds with patience as wide as time. It is the lullaby that no one has heard, and yet everyone carries a song, written not in notes, but in the breath of space, drifting slow, drifting always. Its silence is the silence of sleep itself, endless, surrounding tender, a hush so large it becomes indistinguishable from the darkness it inhabits. To imagine it is to step into a boundary that is not a boundary, to enter a cradle with no rim, to breathe in a veil that cannot be lifted. The Ort. Cloud has never been seen, but it is there in the same way a dream is there unseen, surrounding patient eternal. Billions of fragments of ice and stone lie in stillness, resting as though sleep itself had claimed them, scattered across the wide reaches, yet bound in the same hush. Their forms are simple, their presence quiet, each one a bead of frost, each one a muted pebble, folded into the quilt of night. They do not stir, they do not call, they remain suspended in silence, breathing in rhythm with the unseen tides of space. The dark holds them, as a cradle holds children, not restraining, not urging, only letting the quiet weight of time settle softly upon their frozen skins. It is not emptiness, but a dream stretched across endlessness, and then a pause. Each fragment seems to glow faintly with memory, as though the ancient fire that once touched them still lingers in embers too small to see, too deep to fade. They turn slowly, if they turn at all, their movement more suggestion than action, like the stir of curtains when no wind enters, like the pulse of sleep so deep it has no waking. Shadows fold around them, yet within those shadows the promise of light remains trembling, like dew on a blade of grass before dawn. They are asleep, yet their sleep carries the whole rhythm of the universe, an unbroken lullaby. Nothing is hurried, nothing is lost. The quiet grows deeper. In their silence, the ice and stone become a choir without sound, each body another note unplayed, each orbit another breath too slow to measure. Together, they form a sea without waves, a meadow without end, a sky without storm. Their very stillness becoming the pattern that defines the night. They do not need to shine, for the faint light that touches them is enough to reveal their rest, enough to show that even the smallest can be part of the vast. Their calmness spreads outward, soft as a ripple that does not disturb, soft as warmth that lingers even when the fire has gone. Time bends around them, and in bending it too seems to fall asleep, and so another breath. They lie in every direction, scattered like seeds on the wind, yet never landing, drifting like snow that has forgotten to fall, poised in a suspension that feels like the closing of eyes. Some are round, some jagged, some no more than dust, yet each one is equal in its rest, each one folded into the same embrace of a silence. They do not call attention, they do not seek to be counted, they simply exist as part of the dark's patient rhythm. In their numbers, they create not a crowd, but a harmony, as though the night had chosen to fill itself with endless beads of frost to remind the void that it is not empty, it is full of sleep. And then stillness again. The billions remain a constellation of sleepers, their frozen hearts unmoving, yet steady their presence, quiet, yet endless their silence, wide enough to be mistaken for nothingness. But it is not nothing. It is the very texture of the universe, resting, breathing in unison, waiting without waiting, turning without turning. Each fragment becomes a vessel of calm, each stone a keeper of dreams, each grain of ice a whisper in the lullaby that holds the stars. They are the sleepers of the cosmos, countless and unseen, yet their stillness spreads like a tide, folding the entire night into its gentle rhythm, and in that rhythm, everything rests. Far away so far that the sun itself fades into the quiet fabric of night, it appears no longer as a blazing hearth, but as a star among countless others, one flicker folded into the immense choir of light. Its familiar warmth is softened into a single spark, indistinguishable from the billions of sparks woven across the sky, each one trembling with the same patient rhythm. The great fire that once commanded the center now seems small, reduced to a lantern glimpsed through mist, shining not to rule, but to join. Around it, the dark grows wide, and still carrying the sense of endless fields where no center can be found, where every point might be the beginning, and every glimmer might be the heart. The sun breathes quietly, now hidden among its companions, and then a pause. The stars lean closer, in their multitude, each one shimmering like a blossom suspended on an invisible branch, each one offering the same faint pulse of light that could belong to any other. The sun does not announce itself. It does not stand apart. It hums in the same tone, a thread in the woven fabric of night's tapestry. Its voice is not louder, its glow not brighter. It is only another note in the lullaby, another ember glowing with the same softness as the rest. Darkness stretches between them, all like the spaces between breaths, allowing light to emerge, not as flame, but as gentle rhythm. The sky is filled, yet still feels hushed, as though every spark were whispering together. The hush deepens. Distance makes every star equal, every fire a flicker, every blaze a fragile pearl floating in shadow, so that the sun's identity dissolves into the crowd of brightness. It is not absence, but belonging, not loss, but immersion, as though the hearth of home had finally joined the wider choir of voices around it. Each light sways in its place, each pulse an echo, each shimmer a sign of a rhythm too vast to be hurried. The sun breathes here as any other, does slow and patient, folding its warmth into the stillness, surrendering to the vast fabric of night. Its path is not solitary, but one of many moving with the tide of stars. And then another breath. The eye cannot single it out, for every gleam is alike, every sparkle part of the same unbroken cloth of sky, each thread shimmering in silence. The sun is one among billions, indistinguishable, gentle content to be part of the whole, not commanding, not separate, only present. The night accepts it as it accepts all, cradling each spark with equal softness, allowing none to be too bright, none to be forgotten. The rhythm continues without emphasis, without center, only a steady unfolding of light within dark. The great fire is now a simple flame, carried as quietly as a sigh, and the sigh lingers, so far from the worlds that circle it, so far from the warmth that wants to find it. The sun is now a star like any other, a point among points, a lantern among lanterns, drifting within the stillness of an immeasurable garden. To step into that distance is to step into a sky without hierarchy, a meadow where every flower gleams alike, a sea where every ripple is another breath. The sun is one wave among waves, one note among notes, one spark among sparks, breathing slowly, resting deeply, surrounded on every side by the same quiet shimmer. In this distance, the heart of day is indistinguishable from the heart of night, and the lullaby of stars continues without end. There is no sharp border here, no edge to mark a limit. for the place feels both inside and outside at once, as if the breath of the cosmos were folding inward and outward in the same quiet rhythm. Darkness spreads like a veil, yet within it glimmers float soft as drifting lanterns, so that the sense of direction melts, and what was boundary dissolves into haze. The eye cannot say where the cradle of warmth ends and where the vastness of the cold begins, for the two entwine like smoke in still air. Every shimmer seems both near and far, every silence both shelter and abyss, and in that mingling there is no division, only a seamless drift. The border has vanished, leaving only the feeling of endlessness, and the endlessness breathes. In this twilight of space, every horizon curves softly into another, each fold of shadow carrying the memory of light, each pulse of brightness blending into the calm of the dark. What was once thought to be a wall now feels like a door, though a door that opens without hinges, without frame, only a slow yielding into more of the same. The rhythm of stars does not confine, it expands, it spreads outward like ripples across a pond, with no shore yet somehow circles back, as if pond and shore are the same. The inside is carried within the outside folded back into the inside, until even words lose their meaning. There is only the drift, the suspension, the breath, a breath that deepens. Silence gathers, but it is not empty, for within it glows 1,000 soft fires, scattered like dew upon an unseen field. No step can measure the difference between here and there, for each spark belongs equally to both. The eye is drawn to no single point, for all points echo one another, and so the gaze rests, carried by the gentle rhythm that makes no demand. This is not a place to define, not a border to cross, but a flowing presence where stillness moves and movement rests. The vastness does not end. The nearness does not begin. They hold one another in quiet embrace, and the embrace lingers. There is no path, no wall, no gate, only the sensation of drifting through a garden with no fence, where every bloom leans into shadow and every shadow leans into bloom. What was within is already without, and what was without has already entered within, so that there is no distinction, only the weaving of one breath into another. Time seems to fold like fabric, soft and uncreased, allowing every moment to be both past and present, both departure and return. The darkness is not separate from the light. It is the space that allows the glow to breathe, the hush that allows the pulse to sound. The hush continues. Here at the rimless edge, the cosmos feels as though it were both vessel and ocean, both heartbeat and silence, both lantern and night. No map can mark it, no line can hold it, for it does not yield to the thought of limit. It is a lullaby without beginning or end, a tide without ebb or flow, a cycle that breathes but never concludes. In its embrace, the sense of boundary softens, dissolves, and disappears, leaving only the calm of being carried as though within and beyond were one and the same. And in that sameness, the universe rests. The idea of the solar system's size stretches outward like a breath without end, a thought that does not find its edge, but keeps dissolving into softer distance. What begins with a circle of warmth soon unfolds into layers upon layers of drifting companions, each orbit a thread woven into the loom of silence. The mind reaches for measure, but measure slips away, for every line drawn melts into another, as though the boundaries were made of mist. It feels less like a number and more like a horizon, that keeps retreating, leaving only the sensation of a garden whose pathways never close. The immensity does not press, it only unfolds, and the unfolding continues. The further the gaze drifts, the more it discovers quiet companions, hidden in shadow faint bodies, circling like forgotten lanterns, their paths long and unhurried. Each ring of a space carries the weight of calm, as though time itself has slowed to a whisper, stretching endlessly until the whisper itself dissolves. The vastness here is not loud or overwhelming. It is patient. It is still. It is as soft as the air in a sleeping room. The impression of size becomes less a fact and more a feeling, a gentle awe that lingers like twilight at the edge of a field. Nothing needs to be counted, for the sense of expanse speaks without numbers, and in that speaking silence grows deeper. The light of the sun becomes only a dim companion, a lamp whose glow reaches but does not command a fading warmth that still marks the center, yet yields to the dark. Around it, planets and smaller wanderers drift in orbits like ripples on an endless pond, each one circling with its own rhythm, each one fading into the distance until distance itself becomes a dream. The size of it all resists grasp, because to grasp would be to end, and there is no ending, only continuation. The great measure is a sigh too long to finish a wave too wide to return. The system is no longer a system, but a tide that flows into itself, and the tide moves slowly, beyond the known companions, beyond the faint belts of ice and stone, lies a hush, where imagination must step softly for the edges blur and dissolve. It is said that here begins the cloud, the shell, the veil of drifting fragments, like frozen breath surrounding the whole. In a gentle sleep, whether seen or unseen, the thought of it deepens the sense of expanse. For if the circle already feels endless, what then of the circle around the endless? The solar system stretches into this unknown, not as a border, but as a murmur, as though whispering that its size is more feeling than fact, more dream than definition. And the dream lingers in this boundless garden, where every orbit is both near and far, where every glow is both faint and alive. The idea of size melts into the rhythm of drifting. What is large becomes endless. What is endless becomes intimate, for the breath of the system carries both the vast and the small, as though they were the same. The thought of measure falls silent, replaced by the softness of immeasurable space, a lull that soothes, like a hand smoothing fabric across a resting body. And in that lull, the solar system is felt not as a distance to cross, but as a song without conclusion, carried by the hush of the universe itself. From the quiet center, where warmth still gathers, the mind drifts outward, tracing a circle that grows wider and wider until the circle itself becomes more than a shape, more than a boundary, more than a mark upon space. It is imagined as a ring so vast that light bends into hush, a gentle enclosure that wraps all that breathes within the reach of the sun. Each orbit, each path, each drifting fragment is gathered into its embrace, held not by walls, but by a rhythm that repeats like a pulse beneath silence. The circle is not drawn by hand, not etched in stone, but breathed into being. A curve made of time and distance. Around it flows darkness, yet the darkness does not weigh, it only rests, and the rest deepens. From that center, thought spreads like ripples in water, reaching first to the inner worlds, the places where light falls more directly, where warmth clings close, like a blanket to a sleeping form. The path then stretches further to realms where brightness dims, where orbits move slower, gentler, as though pausing between each breath. Beyond these lie the belts of frozen memory, streams of ice and rock that drift like dust motes caught in a beam, their slow arcs forming another layer of the vast circle. Each layer does not end, it yields into the next until the imagination finds itself at the very edge where circle and horizon blur, and the blur is soft. Here on the rim that is not truly a rim, distance folds into itself, giving the impression of both presence and absence, both boundary and openness. The circle becomes less a line and more a sea endless, in its spread calm in its silence. Stars beyond the system flicker like distant candles, yet even their light seems to belong within the circle, woven into its invisible threads. The darkness here is profound, but it is not empty. It is a cradle where fragments rest, a garden where shadows bloom. What surrounds feels infinite, and yet it is held gently as though the circle were a hand cupped around night, and the night breathes. The farthest thought carries to the imagined shell the place where fragments drift unseen, a haze of frozen whispers surrounding the whole, as though the circle wished to protect its heart with a veil. It is said to extend beyond measure, but the measure dissolves, leaving only the impression of a breath, drawn so wide it touches nothing and everything at once. In this space, the center and the edge lose distinction, for the edge curves back into the center, and the center expands into the edge, until all that remains is a great roundness of being. The circle is the embrace, the system, the dream, the hush, and the hush lingers. The vision closes upon itself, the circle imagined, not as a mark to contain, but as a melody to soothe. From the radiant heart to the unseen rim, every distance is gathered into a single curve, a quiet symmetry that feels less like space and more like sleep. Darkness fills the shape, but within the darkness glows the faint memory of every orbit, every turn, every fragment that has ever moved within. It is a circle that cannot be traced, cannot be ended, for it is drawn not on paper, but upon the breath of the universe itself. To imagine it is to rest within it, as though the night itself were folding into a circle, vast enough to hold silence forever. At the heart of the stillness rests a golden lamp, its glow spreading like a breath across the dark, gentle and unhurried, never forcing, only offering warmth to those who drift nearby. Around this quiet fire, countless paths unwind, each one a circle, each one a rhythm that returns, as though the darkness itself were weaving threads of motion into an invisible tapestry. Planets curve like beads, sliding slowly along hidden strings, their weight softened by distance, their journeys stretched into lullabies of return. The glow touches each faint, for some stronger, for others, but always present like a memory that does not fade. All revolves in calm, drawn not by force, but by a quiet presence, and the presence rests. Small fragments drift in the same embrace, pieces of ice and rock that follow long arcs, never hurried, never straying, always part of the larger turning. Their movements are whispers, faint ripples across the surface of an unseen pond, each echoing the same center, each reflecting the same quiet flame. Dust gathers too, not as weight, but as haze, softening the paths, giving the sense of clouds gently circling, endlessly repeating. Nothing here resists, nothing demands, only the steady continuation of a cycle that has no sharp beginning. In this stillness, even fragments feel eternal, and eternity feels soft. The golden lamp itself does not speak, does not command it, only burns with patience, sending light outward as though scattering seeds across a field of night. Each orbiting body receives its portion, turning with the rhythm of the seasons, yielding to the pull of silence that holds all together. Darkness does not break the connection, for even where the glow fades to almost nothing, the circle remains, as though the memory of warmth is enough to guide the path. Around and around, the motion continues, not rushing forward, not halting, only circling in unbroken calm. The golden lamp shines, and everything drifts in answer, and the answer is quiet. The planets large and small move with grace, not colliding, not straying, but tracing the same old paths, carved by time like dancers, repeating a pattern without end. Their colors gleam, faintly softened by distance, yet in their turning they reflect the central flame, carrying its light into the farthest reaches. Around them, rings shimmer like breath turned visible. Belts of dust glow faintly, as though remembering the lamp that lights their sleep. Even where cold reigns, the sense of turning remains warm, for the golden lamp lies always at the center, steady as a heartbeat. It glows, and everything glows with it, and the glow lingers from the nearest circle to the farthest, from the great worlds to the smallest grain of dust. All are gathered into the same embrace, turning endlessly, as though lulled by a song too soft to hear, but too deep to resist. The golden lamp burns without hurry, without end, without edge, and in its light, the entire garden of space finds a rhythm to follow. Nothing is apart, nothing is forgotten, for all turns together, bound not by chains, but by breath, by the quiet radiance that spreads outward in silence. The lamp burns, the worlds drift, the dust flows, and the darkness folds around it all like a blanket. In that blanket, the circle continues soft and unbroken. The sense of size is not captured in numbers, not measured by lines drawn across a page, but felt instead as an opening that expands without end, a widening that belongs more to the quiet of imagination than to the certainty of measure. From the warmth at the center to the fading edge where light turns thin, the space unfolds like a breath drawn too slowly to ever finish, a breath that widens until it becomes indistinguishable from the stillness it rests within. To think of size here is not to calculate, but to drift, to allow the thought of vastness to rise like mist and dissolve into the sky of the mind. Each orbit and each fragment of dust only deepens the impression, not by telling how far, but by suggesting how endless. The scale becomes a feeling, not a figure, and the feeling lingers. The imagination travels outward, passing through circles of worlds that drift like beads upon invisible threads, each more distant than the last, yet none breaking the continuity of the whole. In this slow procession, distance ceases to be a boundary and becomes instead a rhythm, like the steps of a dancer that echo beyond the stage, soft and unending. The size is not grasped by reaching the end, but by realizing there is no end, only continuation, only a folding outward that repeats with the patience of night. Every new horizon offers not closure, but opening, as though the universe itself breathes wider each time the thought attempts to close. The vastness is not something to hold, but something to surrender to. And surrender feels calm. Beyond the bright worlds, and dim companions, the silence grows thicker, carrying with it the sense of a veil stretched into nowhere, yet never torn. Here, the measure of space dissolves completely, replaced by the quiet suggestion of fragments adrift, tiny sparks within a sea too broad for the eye to rest upon. To imagine this place is not to see clearly, but to feel softly, to let the weight of infinite distance rest like a blanket across the chest of thought. The size is not in what is counted, but in what cannot be contained, the immeasurable, held gently by the imagination itself. The mind does not finish the circle, it only breathes within it, and the breath deepens. Even the faintest glimmer of the golden lamp at the center adds to the impression, for its light reaches with a tenderness that fades, but never truly disappears, stretching further than thought can follow. That stretch, more than any measure, reveals the expanse, for it shows how far warmth will travel to meet the silence. Each orbit, each drifting body, each wandering fragment continues this story of vastness, written not with lines, but with spiral, with curves, with the patient circling that never concludes. The imagination steps into this story and finds itself wandering without limit, as though invited to drift forever. Vastness becomes a lullaby, and the lullaby continues. In the end, the sense of size is felt not in the knowing, but in the unknowing, not in the certainty of edges, but in the mystery of their absence. The solar system becomes a circle that holds more than bodies and orbits. It holds the boundless quiet of thought itself, stretching outward until inward and outward lose their meaning. The imagination expands with it, moving like a tide that rises and never falls, flowing into silence and returning with calm. To sense its magnitude is to stand within a dream that does not close a garden, with no wall, a sky with no ceiling. It is not a number, but a breath, not a limit, but a song without end, carrying the soul of distance into rest. And in that rest, vastness is known only as peace. The balance of the system is delicate poised, like the notes of a slow song that never ends, each tone unfolding into the next, each silence blending seamlessly into sound. Around the golden lamp at the center, orbits weave like threads of a hidden melody, carrying planets and fragments along curves that return endlessly, without haste. The rhythm is steady, but not rigid, more like the breathing of a vast body, at rest, inhaling and exhaling without ever breaking the flow. No single motion dominates, for each turn softens into another. Each pause is filled with continuation. The harmony rests upon stillness, yet it is alive, and the stillness hums. The great circles of the planets trace their patterns, like violins, drawn slowly across strings, long arcs of sound that bend but never break their resonance, mingling in the quiet air of space. Between them, smaller fragments and dust glide as faint harmonies, adding depth without weight, soft chords beneath the melody that holds all together. Each movement is fragile, as though even the slightest change would scatter the song, yet the fragility itself creates beauty, for it makes the music tender. The balance does not shout its presence, it whispers it in tones too subtle to count, in pauses too soft to name. The system sings without a voice, yet its music carries, and the music drifts. The faint glow of the central flame keeps time, not as a clock, but as a heartbeat, steady and patient, guiding the circling dance without command. Each orbit responds with its own rhythm, some faster, some slower, but all weaving into a single slow song that unfolds in silence. The harmony is not made by force, but by yielding, each body surrendering to the curve that carries it, each path bending into a pattern that feels inevitable. It is not the inevitability of rule, but the inevitability of breath of a sigh that repeats endlessly. This is how the balance lingers, and the lingering soothes, even where collisions might once have scattered silence, has softened the memory, folding it back into the song so that discord becomes harmony, disarray becomes part of the pattern. Dust left adrift joins the music as a low murmur, a subtle chord beneath the brighter tones of the worlds, and even fragments cast aside still circle, adding texture to the melody. The fragility of it all does not weaken, but strengthens, for the music is made from the very fact that nothing is permanent, everything in motion, yet everything at peace. It is a lullaby, not composed, but breathed, drawn out slowly, across ages without beginning or end. The system sways like a cradle in the dark, and the cradle rocks. From the center to the edge, the harmony spreads, each orbit a note, each breath of silence, a pause, each fragment of dust, a faint vibration that deepens the sound. No hand conducts, no line of measure restrains, yet the balance holds, because it is not held at all, but released, allowed to drift as it will. And in drifting, it finds its song. The melody is endless, though it never rises, never falls. It only continues, carrying within it the quiet assurance of cycles that cannot be broken. The song of the system does not seek conclusion. It rests in the continuation, in the fragile beauty of balance that lasts because it never needs to end. And in that continuation, the universe hums like a lullaby without words. The solar system closes like a lull, wide yet tender, vast yet embracing a circle that never breaks, though it stretches farther than thought can follow. At the center glows a quiet lamp, steady in its radiance, sending warmth into the surrounding dark, not in haste, but in patience, not in command, but in care. Around it, planets drift in long arcs, each one turning with the rhythm of an old song, each one folding its motion into the harmony of the whole. The vastness does not feel empty, for every silence is filled with breath, every shadow with the faint shimmer of dust and ice. What might seem endless is held softly, as though cupped in invisible hands, and the holding is gentle. The paths of the worlds are neither rigid nor chaotic, but balanced like strands of music stretched across a timeless scale, slow notes repeating, never ending, never rushing toward conclusion. The outer belts glimmer faintly, a sea of fragments moving in their own rhythm, weaving an unseen border that feels less like a wall and more like a hush. The innermost circles glow with brighter fire, yet even their speed is softened by distance, their dance folded into the same rhythm that guides the farthest companions. Each orbit becomes part of a larger song, and the song itself becomes indistinguishable from silence. The balance rests within motion, the motion rests within balance, and the balance endures. The golden lamp in the center does not diminish, though its glow fades into distance, softening into a faint touch that still guides every fragment, every grain of dust, every body drifting at the farthest edge. Its presence is like a heartbeat, steady and unseen, reminding the darkness that warmth persists, even when unseen. Every orbit answers, though, not with sound, but with the quiet turning of cycles, a music too deep to hear, yet always felt. The smallest fragment carries the same rhythm as the greatest world, both circling within the same embrace, both returning endlessly without strain. The night holds them all in its silence, and the silence breathes, the outer shell imagined as a veil of frozen whispers extends like a cradle into the unseen, wrapping the whole with a softness that is more dream than boundary. Beyond it, stars scatter like distant lanterns, yet even they seem folded into the same circle, for the solar system feels not apart, but continuous with the field of night. There is no line between within and beyond, only the sensation of drifting outward further and further, while still being held by the same invisible center. The vastness loses its edge. The distance becomes a flow. The system becomes the night itself. To imagine its size is to rest within its embrace, and the embrace deepens. The planets move slowly, each in its own way, yet all bound into the same, turning the same patient spiral that never concludes. Their paths do not collide, but weave, each respecting the quiet order that carries them, each echoing the central flame in its own color, its own glow. Dust and fragments drift like chords beneath the melody, filling the space with texture, softening the dark with their presence. Even emptiness is not empty, but alive with faint murmurs of motion, faint whispers of balance. The song of the system is endless because it does not seek to finish, and the song continues. The sense of measure dissolves into imagination, for the scale is not known by numbers, but by surrender, by letting the mind expand outward until outward becomes indistinguishable from within. From the center to the rim, every part belongs to the whole. Every turn is part of the same unbroken pattern. To think of it as size is to miss its softness, for what it offers is not calculation, but calm, not certainty, but stillness. The solar system becomes a garden without walls, a field without horizon, an ocean without shore. It is held, and yet it flows, and the flowing is calm. Each orbit can be thought of as a breath inhaling, when it turns close exhaling, when it drifts far together, forming a rhythm that is neither fast nor slow, but perfectly even. The golden lamp breathes too, its light pulsing into the void, not with urgency, but with the timeless patience of fire. The darkness does not resist it, only receives, folding the light into its silence, carrying it further, letting it soften until it feels like memory. What results is not a struggle, but a lull, not a clash, but a weaving of contrasts into harmony. The night and the light hold one another gently, and the gentleness soothes. The thought of balance remains fragile, yet unbroken, delicate yet steady, like a cradle swaying endlessly in the dark. Every planet, every stone, every particle joins in this rocking, no matter how large, no matter how small. Their union is not forced. It is simply the way of things, the natural song of turning and returning, of circling and yielding, of glowing and dimming. Each completes the others, each holds the others, and together they become something that feels eternal without needing to be. The lullaby is written not in sound, but in silence, not in words, but in orbits, and the lullaby drifts. At last, the solar system closes as it began, with a circle, a flame, and the darkness that receives, both without question. Its vastness remains immeasurable, its paths remain unending, its balance remains as delicate as the breath that sustains it. Yet all of this does not weigh it, soothes, for the immensity is carried not as burden, but as peace, not as chaos, but as calm. It is large enough to contain silence, patient enough to continue forever, gentle enough to feel like sleep. The system drifts, the light glows, the darkness holds, and in that holding, the universe rests. The song drifts into quiet, each orbit folding into stillness, each glow softening into the dark, until the vast circle of the system feels less like a motion and more like a dream, breathing in its sleep. The golden lamp at the center continues to glow not in brilliance, but in tenderness, sending out warmth as if whispering to every distant body, reminding each fragment that it belongs to the same embrace. Around it, the great worlds keep turning, the dust keeps floating, the belts keep circling, and all together they create a lull that does not rise or fall, but only continues. It is a music without climax, a rhythm without urgency, a story that never needs to end. The universe hums as a cradle hums, and the cradle rocks gently. In this hush, the vast system feels close, as though every fragment of ice and stone were resting beside the listener, as though every orbit were nothing more than the slow rise and fall of breath in the dark. The edges of thought begin to blur, dissolving into the same softness that holds the stars, dissolving into the same rhythm that guides the planets. Sleep drifts, near not as an interruption, but as a continuation, another cycle in the endless song. The body becomes another orbit, the breath another, turning the silence, another chord woven into the harmony of space. The night receives everything, and the night holds everything. The story closes not with an ending, but with an invitation to rest deeper, to let the mind drift like a planet circling, without haste, to let the breath follow the rhythm of a dust grain, falling slowly through the dark. Tomorrow will bring another tale, another quiet unfolding of the cosmos, another slow song for the night. For now, there is only the warmth of the cradle, the glow of the lamp, the steady balance of orbits moving through silence. Rest within it and drift into the gentle sleep that waits patient as the stars. And so, the system continues turning softly, waiting while the dream deepens until morning.